Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February Command PE livestream. I'm Brandon Johnson. I'm the Matrix Pro Sims Command PE Training Manager. This month, I'm going to be taking a step back from the advanced topics I've covered in the last few streams and focus on an overview and introduction to Command PE. I'll be starting off with a short overview presentation and then moving on to air and naval kill chain demonstrations, covering data exports and Monte Carlo, some example use cases, the Command PE scenario editor, and finally editing the database. Command began as a commercial home use video game. Command PE is a very effective simulation tool for the defense community. There are several examples of Command PE being used to inform decisions. These include the U.S. Department of Defense's studies on the Arrow hypersonic missile and the Iron Dome system to determine if those were valuable tools for the U.S. military. Now, we will not pretend that we were the final arbiter in these decisions. We were not, but we were part of that process. Additionally, we're seeing growth in defense use. We're seeing growth in defense use of digital war games. There was a recent article in the U.S. newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, which included this, and in particular the use of Command PE. Command PE is in use in 25 nations with over 150 client organizations and thousands of users. CPE is used as a wargaming tool to support analysis, education, and training. And on this slide, we have an example of different organizations using Command for those purposes. NATO is using Command to run educational and training war games for naval commanders and staffs in France, Germany, Estonia, Latvia, and the United Kingdom. Example of education usage comes from the Luftwaffe of the German Air Force, who train all new Air Force officers using Command to help them understand the fundamentals of air power. Since 2020, the U.S. Navy has conducted over 23 classified analytical war games using Command PE. In particular, they use the ability to modify the ships and their systems in our database, creating classified versions of those ships' capabilities and limitations. They then employ those systems in scenarios of interest to see how effective a new concept, capability, or tactic might be. Finally, Air Mobility Command of the U.S. Air Force uses Command to conduct assessments of campaign plans, logistics, and field planning. Some badges and logos of other organizations using Command PE are shown along the bottom. This includes the United States Marine Corps, Naval Postgraduate School, the Australian Air Force, DSTL in the United Kingdom. Now let me tell you about the software. Command PE is a physics-based whole Earth and all domains simulation battle space. Command represents the air, sea, land, space, and cyber environment with a principal focus on air and maritime domains. WAN principally provides bases, threats, and targets for the domains at the moment. Space systems are depicted on our top image, showing a fully rendered Earth with satellites orbiting the globe. We create the effects of cyber activities, for instance, turning off or destroying a sensor or delaying or disrupting communications. Command sensor and propulsion systems are physics-based, and the lower right image shows the effects of terrain, mountains, hills, and the Earth's curvature on the line of sight of sensors. Terrain is detailed level 1, and our bathymetry is 450 meters per cell at the equator. And what really sets Command apart is our database, which essentially is a database of all the world's frontline air and maritime equipment from 1946 into the near future, with all of that is editable. The total database is over 106,000 entities. This slide shows an example of a U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptor. Our database organizes the aircraft as a system of systems, including weapons mounts, propulsion, systems, loadouts, the airframe, communications, and system sensors. And we see that all of these are Microsoft database tables that allow our users to edit these properties. For example, you can take the M61 Vulcan cannon and easily replace that with an onboard laser, or or add additional communication capabilities. And I'll be demonstrating this here towards the end of the stream. Similarly, this slide shows a U.S. Navy destroyer. And just like the F-22, we can see that it's broken down into its individual components. The hull, propulsion, the onboard mounts and VLS cells or launchers, communications, its radars, its sonar systems, as well as its aviation facilities. But the true advantage of having an editable database is seen when you combine that with the command scenario editor capability. As a video game, command has always given users the ability to create their own scenarios, and the features that were designed for anyone to use at home makes it easy to create complex scenarios to support defense professionals. This slide will show a video that starts with an empty map and creates an airbase defense scenario in less than 5 minutes. As we start the scenario, we begin to manually creating an airbase, searching the command database for the objects that we expect on an airfield: runways, runway access points, storage facilities, aircraft shelters, and taxiways. But because command has thousands of commercial users since release in 2012, you don't have to individually create all of these pieces. Users of the commercial home use version of command have already created this airfield and hundreds of other facilities. These are available to all of our users, allowing you to add these to a scenario in only a few clicks. So we're deleting our our manually placed facilities, and I'm now going to load in the pre-placed. So this is Suda Bay in Greece. And turning the view to our normal unit mode, we can see all of the different facilities that make up this airbase. Next, we add a threat aircraft, again having the whole database available to choose from. Once an aircraft is chosen, we select their weapons, give them an attack order. And I'm going to jump the video ahead to I will be diving more into the database or into the scenario editor in a little bit. So we give our aircraft an attack order. We can, anywhere in the UI that's a hyperlink will take us to the relevant entry in the command database. And then we can see that the airbase is now, our red aircraft are now have launched their munitions. And then we can see the blue defenses engaging those, both the aircraft as well as the incoming munitions. Now I want to talk about how we can use this data in an analytical way, exporting data from the scenario with the option to use the Monte Carlo mode to run the scenario many times. Once the scenario is built, as we saw in the previous slide, forces are given missions to execute. Then select the data output and format and its types of data for exporting. Data exports are all in common formats such as CSV, which is a spreadsheet, or a database format, SQL, MS Access, and others. With the format selected, we select the type of export report to export. In this case, would be export the weapon endgame. The moments that decide if a weapon hits its target. Then you simulate and review the scenario data that was exported, which was the weapon endgame. This spreadsheet shows the exports from command that describe each weapon engagement step. We see the target, their positions relative, the attacker, the target, their positions relative to each other, the results from that step of the engagement, and the message that describes the situation, starting with the probability of success, any modifiers to that probability, and the outcome, which is the result of generating a random number between 1 and 100. The final step is to use command's built-in Monte Carlo analysis tool, which allows the software to run the scenario as many times as you want, at a degree of fidelity you wish, to capture the data you need. The final step is to use command's built-in Monte Carlo analysis tool, which allows the software to run the scenario as many times as you want, at a degree of fidelity you wish, to capture the data you need. The final step is to use command's built-in Monte Carlo analysis tool, which allows the software to run the scenario as many times as you want, at a degree of fidelity you wish, to capture the data you need. The Monte Carlo tool is particularly useful in seeing the range of possible outcomes across a number of scenario runs. So with the slide complete, I'm going to move into our kill chain demonstration. So as I mentioned, Command PE primarily focuses on air and naval operations at the tactical and operation levels. It can run in real time or any number of time acceleration settings while maintaining the same fidelity I'll show in today's demonstration. In this scenario, I'm going to show an anti-air warfare scenario. We have 3 aircraft. We have an F-15 down here to the south, an F-16 up here to the north, and they're being supported by an E-3 airborne early warning aircraft. I'm deliberately using older airframes and systems because the kill chain can be significantly compressed when using modern systems and sensors. I'm using NTDS icons today, but Command also has the capability to use stylized or user-created custom icons. We've been warned about a threat from the east, and that there are also civilian aircraft in the area. So looking at any of the units, we see that as we saw in the database, they're broken down into those individual components. Weapons mounts, magazines, sensors, comms, propulsion. If any of these components are damaged or destroyed, it will directly affect the operational effectiveness of the platform. For example, the F-15 would be incapable of finding targets on its own if its radar was destroyed. We can control units manually or via pre-planned missions. In this scenario, I'm manually directing the blue forces, while the red force is flying pre-planned actions. We could also use the mission editor to create various types of missions, assign assets to those missions, and then customize their behavior. I'm going to order both of my fighters to head in easterly direction for the moment. I'm also going to turn on plotted courses for all our aircraft so we can see their movements. Unit behavior depends on both their mission tasking and on a range of doctrine settings. Rules of engagement, the weapon and fuel state aircraft will return to base, if ships use their SAMs in anti-surface mode, as well as various other settings for air and naval operations. MCON allows us to dictate the active or passive status of various sensor types on a platform. Weapon release authorization is used to customize the firing behavior of any weapon, including the number of weapons per salvo, the number of shooters, as well as the firing range. We can see here the Sparrow is set to fire 1 missile against most aircraft types, but it will fire 2 missiles against 4th and 5th generation fighters, with all shots being at max range. As a demonstration, I'm going to change the firing range for 4th and 5th generation fighters to 50% of max range. So we can see shots against other less high-performance aircraft will be at their normal max range, but our shots against those 4th and 5th generation fighters are now 50% or 19 nautical miles. So I'm going to advance time. I'm going to run the scenario in real time for the moment. We see the E3 has passively detected a contact using its AN-AYR1 ELINT sensor. Command's physics-based sensor model uses real-world algorithms to adjudicate detections. This includes generating the yellow area of uncertainty that we see here. So I have a good idea of the bearing to the contact, but you do not have any indication on the range yet. We can see what sensors are detecting the contact and their host platform on the right side panel. We see that the AN-AYR1 on the E3 is the only sensor currently detecting the contact. Opening the contact report tells us what was detected and possible matches within the command database. We've only detected a slapback radar, And this variant is only found on the MiG-29 Fulcrum C and the Yak-141 Freestyle. Anywhere in the command UI that looks like a hyperlink is a hyperlink that will take you to the relevant entry in the command database. So if I click on the E3 and click on the E3's entry over here on the right side panel, we can see it takes us to the E3B Sentry for the United States Air Force for 1996. And scrolling through this page, we can see up here at the top general data on the E3. So length, wingspan, crew, takeoff and landing distances, etc. We can see the sensors. So it has an APY-2 long-range 3D radar, as well as we can see the ANA Wire 1 is the ELINT system on the E3. And scrolling through this page, we'd see other information, loadouts, propulsion information, its mounts, its communications capability, etc. Now I'm going to turn on the E3's radar. So white circle has appeared centered on the E3. White arcs and circles are the maximum range of air sensors. The red circles around our fighters are the maximum range of the longest range weapon currently on the aircraft. So in the case of the F-15, that's the max range of the Sparrow. In the case of the F-16, it's the max range of its AIM-9 Sidewinders. And again, advancing time, we see that our E3 has detected 2 additional contacts. Looking at the new contacts, we don't yet see any tracking information. This is because the E3 has a mechanical scan radar, so one sweep does not give enough information for tracking. Even though it's not shown on the map, we do sweep sensors through their designated arcs. So that sensor is going to sweep around, and in about another 8 to 10 seconds, it's going to sweep around again, and we'll have tracking information on both of those contacts. If this was a phased array radar, we would get that tracking information immediately. And sure enough, once we got a second hit on both contacts, we have firm kinematic tracking information. We can see that they're both coming west. The northern contact has been classified as an unknown bomber, and the southern contact as an unknown commercial aircraft. If I look at the message log, we can see that the E3 classified both contacts using non-cooperative target recognition. 2 types of NCTR are modeled in command. The first checks the reflection from the jet engine blades. The other is a more advanced mode, only possible with phased array radars, that scans the skin of an aircraft to create a digital image of it. So I'm going to increase the time acceleration while our aircraft close the distance. And here in just a moment, that southern contact is going to be identified as a Boeing 747. Again, if we look at the message log, we can see that that was, again, classified using the APY-2, using NCTR mode. And we can also see the distance that that classification was made at 218 nautical miles. And the northern contact has now been identified as a Tu-22 backfire bomber. It has been declared as hostile, again using NCTR on the APY-2. I'm going to give the F-16 an automatic attack order to engage the Tu-22. This means the F-16 will automatically move to intercept and engage per its WRA. So as we move into the engagement, we've doubly simplified red behaviors to show certain features. The F-16 will likely demonstrate damage to systems when it engages the Tu-22. I say likely because we are coming from a generally head-on direction, and so we have a higher chance of hitting the cockpit of the aircraft coming in from this angle. If we were coming in more from the side, we'd have a higher chance of hitting the airframe. And if we were coming in from the rear, we'd have a higher chance of hitting the engines. Now, damage that we do is completely randomized every time we do our damage roll. So it's also possible coming from this angle that will hit the airframe or the engines, or miss. So the F-16 is fired a single AIM-9 Sidewinder. We can see that, obviously, by the missile icon here on the map. We can also see the total number of weapons allocated to a contact by the number to the left of the symbol. So we see the 1 here in this case. And our first missile impacted the target. I'm going to switch to the red side now. If we click on the Tu-22, we can see over here on the right side panel, we've done 16.5% damage to the airframe. We've damaged or destroyed some systems, and we've caused a minor fire. Although given an aircraft this size fire, they don't have a lot of self-repair capability, so this will fire, even if we don't do any further damage, this fire is likely to be fatal to this aircraft. If we look at the damage report, we can see more information about the systems that were damaged. So we've destroyed its bomb site, and we've also done some light damage to one of its engines, which is going to cause this aircraft to immediately start slowing down, since it's essentially now going to be operating off of one engine. And our second missile actually destroyed the Tu-22. If we look at the message log, we can see that our second shot actually destroyed both engines. And so that was the reason for such a relatively easy destruction of the Tu-22. We'll switch back to the blue side now. Order the F-16 to head north. And I'm going to give the F-15 an intercept for our original target, which is now being tracked now that it's within our radar range. Again, it's a multi-role aircraft. We're still detecting only that slot back radar. I'm going to increase time acceleration again. And now we see that its first contact has now been identified as a hostile MiG-29 Fulcrum. So I'm going to give the F-15 an automatic attack order to engage it. And this engagement is going to showcase missile kinematics and TACView integration. TACView is a third-party 3D visualization program. Even though Command is a 2D map, it is a 3D environment. We're going to see the Sparrow missiles from the F-15 loft up and then dive down onto the MiG-29. This will be represented in Command by the altitude changing, and we also see that visually here in TACView. Just going to place that up there at the top right. Now remember, we are firing our Sparrows at 50% of max range. The radar or the range rings on the map are always display the max range of the weapon, regardless of what the WRA setting is set to. Once the F-15 fires, it's going to slow down and decrease speed to slow the rate of closure. Since the Sparrow requires guidance from the firing platform, it will also maneuver to keep the target inside of its radar cone. So it's going to fire 2 missiles. We can see the missiles are lofting up. I just realized I'm still using meters instead of feet. So we're at about 165 or 16,500 meters. So the MiG-29 has detected the launch and is maneuvering to run the missiles out of energy. We can see that the missile speed is decreasing once their boosters cut out. Now, defensive logic depends on when the target has detected the incoming missile or the incoming weapons. In this case, the MiG-29 detected the launch, so it's automatically, again, maneuvering, essentially running away to try and run the missiles out of energy. Once it realizes that it can't outrun the missiles, it's actually going to try to maneuver to get outside of the weapons, outmaneuver the incoming weapons. If it was a shorter range shot, the aircraft might climb or dive rather than initially turning to run away. And we see that our first missile destroyed the target. Air-to-air engagements can have up to 3 distinct phases, depending on the availability of countermeasures. And like all scenario events, we can see the details of the engagement in the message log. In the first phase, decoys such as chaff, flares, and tow decoys will attempt to seduce the incoming missile. So in this case, we had a 15% probability. Our dice roll was 74, so we had a failure. Defensive ECM will attempt the same thing in the second phase. Again, 15% probability. Dice roll was 85, so again, another failure. Assuming the missile hasn't been seduced in the first 2 phases, the third phase is the missile engagement versus the target platform. In this phase, Command applies several modifiers to the initial probability of hit based on the current state of the aircraft. Agility, altitude, crew proficiency, and angle of attack all may result in reductions to the final pH. So we had initial pH of 80%. After all those modifiers, we had a final pH of 68 or 67%. Dice roll was a 1, so it resulted in the hit. And then I've been exporting data through the course of this. And we'll take a quick look at, so data, we have our interactive analysis settings. So this allows us, as we saw there in the presentation, this allows us to set the export formats as well as the data types. So again, all common formats, CSVs, XML, MS Access, SimDish, which is a US government-owned 3D viewing program similar to TACView. We can export to standalone TACView files, SQL Server, as well as SQLite. And then we see the various different export settings. I'm exporting units damaged, units destroyed, as well as the weapon endgame. I'm going to look at the weapon endgame CSV file. And what we can see here is different columns representing the different data. So columns A and B, they're in yellow, represents the scenario information. So the timeline ID, which is unique every time you run this. So if you're running this on Monte Carlo and have multiple different runs in the same file, you can easily identify which run a result came from. The weapon information is columns C through E. It's columns, those are the green columns. We have the parent firing platform information. Columns there in blue. The target information is there in pink. So target ID, target name, the latitude and longitude, altitude and above sea level and above ground level, as well as the distance. And P and Q, there in gray, is the results. And I'm going to wrap this text. And so P is the result. Was it a hit? Was it a point defense? Or was it a kill? And then there in column Q, we see the same information that we saw there in the message log, as well as all the modifiers, or including all of the modifiers. So looking at our final Sparrow shot, we can see, again, we see the base pH. We can see all of the modifiers, as well as our final dice roll. And this allows you to afterwards review the data as well as all the modifiers. So when someone questions you, why did only 60 out of 100 Patriots intercept their targets rather than 80, you can see all of the expected or all of the outcomes. So I'm going to move on to a naval kill chain demonstration now. In this scenario, we're going to show an anti-surface and anti-submarine warfare with a multinational team. So we have a Danish frigate with 2 MH-60 Seahawk helicopters, both configured for anti-submarine warfare. And they're being supported by US Pete Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft. In this scenario, we've been warned about a threat from the south, and again that there was also civilian shipping in the area. I'm not going to go into it too much because we saw a lot of this with aircraft, but we can see that just like aircraft, the frigate is broken down into its individual components. So its mounts, its air facilities, its propulsion. It's the same no matter the platform. They all have the same. They're all made of the same building blocks. What's slightly different for ships is ships have, we also, in addition for the Doctrine, MCON, and WRA, ships also have withdraw and redeploy settings. These allow you to specify the level at which a unit may withdraw from damage or the expenditure or loss of weapons and fuel. Similarly, since repairing, refueling, and restocking warships can be extremely time-consuming, Command allows you to specify the status at which they will redeploy. I'll close the message one for now. I'm going to run the scenario 1-to-1 again for the moment. And what we're going to see in this case is, again, we're getting passive contacts using our P8's ELIN sensor. It's currently detected 3 contacts passively. And again, just like what we saw with the MiG-29 in the previous kill chain, we have a good indication of the bearing to each of these contacts, but we do not yet have any indication on the range. So we can click on each of the contacts and we can see their distance as well, and similar information to what we saw. We can see their WRA, we can see their side, their course, their speed, all of which are unknown at this point in time. We can see what sensors are detecting the contacts. Opening up the contact report for one of these contacts, which has been classified as a guided missile patrol craft. We can see several sensors are being detected, and possible matches within the command database for this platform are a Bullion class patrol boat or missile boat used by Russia. And the other 2 contacts we're detecting, for one of the contacts, we're detecting just generic navigation radar, which is used by several different, or a number of different platforms. So this time, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn on the P8's radar. So this is a surface search sensor, and we see we've almost immediately identified 2 of the closer contacts as commercial vessels. One's a commercial tanker, and the other is a commercial container vessel. I'm going to go ahead and increase our time acceleration now. And we see, again, we've now classified that that 3rd contact as a Bullion class fast guided missile patrol craft. If we look at the database entry for this, again, we can see the general data, so length, the beam, the draft, the height, its tonnage, its sensors, its mounts. Particularly important as to us here are its surface-to-surface missiles, which have a range of 200 nautical miles. These are capable of targeting ships. Also, potentially has land attack cruise missiles on this as well. However, because it's a surface vessel, it is subject to radar horizon limitations. So it's unlikely to have detected us at this point in time. If we switch over to the red side, we can see that it does not, because its radar's on, it has a relatively short-range radar. I believe it does have an ELIN system with over-the-horizon sensor or targeting capability. That's currently not detecting us. And the ELIN system with OTH targeting has a 500 nautical mile range. Again, it's not detecting our surface vessel, it's detecting our P8. And in this case, they are allied with the 2 commercial vessels just to prevent the AI from accidentally firing on them. I'm going to go ahead and increase our time acceleration now to close the distance to within firing range of our frigate's harpoon missiles. Now that the Bullion is within range, I'm going to fire manually, or I'm going to manually engage it using a couple of harpoons. So I bring up the manual weapon allocation. I'm going to manually allocate 4 missiles to it. It's probably overkill, but we have to take into account that we do simulate missile malfunctions. It's also possible that the bullion could intercept a couple of our incoming missiles. So 4 is probably overkill, but I'm going to switch over to the red side again, and we'll zoom in on the bullion, and we'll see when it detects the incoming harpoons. I'm going to be switching between God's Eye for this, as well as what the bullion actually sees. So the bullion has detected the incoming harpoons. Looking at the message log, we can see that it detected them at around 16 nautical miles. Defensive missile engagements can have up to 4 distinct phases, depending on the availability of countermeasures. Defensive weapons will attempt to shoot down the incoming missiles in the first phase. Again, just like air-to-air engagements, we apply several modifiers to the base probability of hit to reduce that final pH. If applicable, modifiers include angle of attack, sea-skimming capability, sea state, target speed, as well as terminal maneuvers of the incoming missiles. So the bullion is now maneuvering to open up its sensors and firing arcs. It does have onboard SAMs. They are short-ranged, with only 3 nautical mile max range, and they are anti-surface-to-surface missile capable. So that's this inner ring here. So we can see the bullion is now engaging the incoming harpoons. It's engaged with missiles as well as its onboard gun. And in this case, it didn't intercept any of the missiles, and all 4 of our missiles impacted the target. As I mentioned, there are 4 distinct phases. We didn't see that here, but in the second phase, if the missile wasn't intercepted, decoys, again, chaff flares, tow decoys, should have attempted to seduce the incoming missile. Defensive ECM will attempt the same thing in the third phase, and if the missiles were not intercepted or seduced, in the fourth phase, we determine if the missile hit the targeted ship and the damage results from it. In this case, because none of the harpoons were intercepted, all 4 impacted the target. And we can see all the different engagements of the different missiles, as well as the deck rounds that were fired at the incoming missiles. We can see here that the Grinch missiles had a base pH of 65%. After modifiers, we had a probability of 8%. And again, all of our dice rolls. So in this case, it was a 62, which was a miss. We see our chaff attempted to seduce the incoming missiles. Each of those were failures. And then, including, in this case, the jamming as well. Again, 15% probability, all failures. And then, in this case, again, all 4 missiles impacted the target and instantly sunk it. It doesn't usually happen. Again, we are completely stochastic. Every time we do a dice roll, it is going to be unique. So if we were to run this scenario again right now, we would actually find that those dice rolls would be slightly different. So moving on to our anti-submarine warfare engagement. One of the civilian vessels has reported seeing a periscope. Going to launch one of the MH-60s to investigate. And we're going to put it on a course heading for the commercial tanker. We'll increase time acceleration. As the MH-60 approaches the area, I'm going to be manually deploying sonar buoys to try and locate the suspected submarine. Again, could also create a anti-submarine warfare patrol mission to have and assign the helicopter to that mission and have it do this automatically. So we have active and passive sonar buoys, which can be deployed above and below the layer. So I'm going to drop a number of sonar buoys above the layer for right now. It's interesting I haven't got a single hit on that submarine yet, though. That's looking at God's Eye, right? I know. All right, there we go. So we did get a hit on the contact. So classified as a goblin. So I'm going to order the MH-60 to circle back around now and drop a couple other buoys to try and get a cross bearing to triangulate the contact. So it's been classified as an SSN. We're narrowing down the position now. All right, we have a pretty firm fix. I'm going to drop a active sonar buoy shallow right on top of the Oh, didn't have my unit selected when I did that. Slow this down. I'm going to drop an active buoy relatively right on top of it. We have a pretty firm fix now. We'll drop a second sonar buoy. We'll drop it active. All right, we now have active tracking of that submarine. There are no friendly submarines known to be in the area, so I'm going to manually declare it as hostile and give the Seahawk an automatic attack order to engage it. Helicopter is going to fly out and then circle back in to launch one of its Mark 54 lightweight torpedoes. Drop one of its Mark 54s. Click on the torpedo. We can see its expected intercept point based off the current state of both contacts. I'm actually going to order the Seahawk to go to min altitude at 0 speed, and this should automatically deploy its dipping sonar. And we see that the submarine has now been classified as a Victor 3 nuclear-powered submarine. Our torpedo missed. Looks like it got down below the sub. All right, so I'm going to have the Seahawk, our torpedo may circle back around. Looks like it's diving back down. Going to make a second run. I'm going to order the Seahawk to launch a second torpedo at the contact, though, to continue to engage it. We'll see if that first Mark 54 has the fuel and speed to catch up with the Victor 3. Should have the speed. Intercept point is about a minute, so it looks like it does have the fuel for it. Notice our torpedoes automatically dived. Oh, and we did get a hit, and in this case, a kill. So if we switch over to the red side, we can see that expected damage of what was done to the Victor 3 and why such a single torpedo was enough to destroy it. Again, normally that doesn't happen. So we can see that both of the acoustic decoys fired by the Victor 3 failed to decoy the submarine or decoy the torpedo. And in this case, we just did heavy damage to everything. We got very lucky on both our weapon penetration as well as our damage rolls on this one. We caused severe flooding. That's probably why the Victor 3 was instantly destroyed. It attempted to urgently attempted to surface because of the flooding, but it got hit by a secondary explosion at 7 meters. And again, we just did enough damage to sink it. And looking at our data exports, we'd see data exports similar to what we saw for the... I'm going to actually need to reopen this file. Reopening the weapon endgame, we can see similar results to what we saw there for the air-to-air engagement. Firing name, weapon platform, and again, looking over here in column Q, or our gray columns, we can see the results of the engagement. And also switch over to our unit damaged export. And we can see the damage at each of the different phases. As well as their... Okay, I guess that one, for whatever reason, combined with the previous one on the air-to-air kill chain. That's interesting. Well, you can see that we did 57% or 58% damage with our first Mark 54, and then we essentially caused additional damage. Well, it doesn't really tell us why. So I'll move on to a couple of use case scenarios that combine both the data exports that we've seen as well as the ability to run command as Monte Carlo. Close that slide. Close the wrong presentation. My apologies. So this was an example. What I'm going to show now is a sample or example missile defense scenario. This was used to generate sample unclassified scenario using non-specific units, varying the defensive set. Our purpose was to show a functional tool that can generate examples and demonstrate the tools for further analysis. So what we had here is we had a fixed attacking force, and then we varied the defending force, and we'll see the different variants. We created 10 different variants. We're going to see 4 of those here in this example. So we had 24 H-6K Badgers, each launching 6 air-launched cruise missiles. In our first defensive set, we had a single Patriot, 2 Iron Dome batteries, 6 Centurion close-in weapon systems, and the red objective in this was 3 defended sites. So we can see the bombers are launching their air-launched cruise missiles. And this is using a true view, God's eye view. The red actually, or the blue side couldn't see that. And then here we can see blue is with their over the horizon radar limitations. They're detecting the missiles at relatively short range. So the Patriot missile is going to be the first to fire. And we can see yet that blue doesn't yet see that third salvo coming in from the north. Iron Dome's at fire, now within close-in weapon, where the Centurion ranges. Blue is also now detecting that northern salvo, which is slightly behind the other two in this case. And at this point, most of their missiles have been expended. Although that northern Patriot, or that northern Iron Dome, I'm sorry, still had some missiles left. And so we ran this scenario 100 times. On average, we intercepted 79 missiles, and 17 on average hit their targets. And we can also see the average expenditures. Now, the second iteration, in this case, we kept the Patriots as well as the Iron Domes. And in this case, we swapped out the Centurions for high-energy lasers. So similar to what we saw in the first case, the Patriots and the Iron Domes engage, and then we can see that the lasers are now engaged, are engaging in this case versus the Centurions. We're also speeding up the video because we don't need to see the full engagement in normal time like we did the first one. So in this case, we ran it again. We ran it for 100 iterations. This case, we intercepted 86 missiles up from the 79. And in this case, we had on average 9.6 that intercepted their targets. We used 17.5 laser shots on average and expended all of our Patriots and Iron Domes. So in the most expensive high end, we still have the Patriot and Iron Domes. We've also have our high energy lasers. But in this case, we've also added an Arleigh Burke destroyer with an E2D Hawkeye. And the E2D Hawkeye gives us an over-the-horizon look-down capability, as well as the ability to guide the missiles from the destroyer. So we can see here, outside of the Burks or our ground-based radars, the E2 is guiding the SM-6s in groups of 8, which is the channel limitation on the E2D. As the missiles come over the horizon, the Burke is engaging with enhanced Sea Sparrow missiles. And then the Burke has shot itself dry at this point. Now the Patriot's engaging as well. So again, after 100 iterations, we only even though we added a Burke as well as an E2D, we only intercepted on average 4 more missiles, so 90.5 of the 144. We still only had about 5.5 missiles that hit their designated targets, but we expended a lot more ammunition. So whether those 4 additional missiles were worth the cost and expenditures is open for debate in this case. So similar to the missile defense, we also have a strike variant of this. Again, we were generating sample unclassified data of what a potential variations of a U.S. carrier airstrike would be. using E2Ds, Super Hornets, E-18 Growlers, and F-35Cs versus a non-specific threat. So we can see here a general layout of how the strike that we're about to observe is conducted. Coming from the south is our armed shooters as well as our jammers, as well, and those are fire as well as decoy shots coming there from the south. And then coming directly from the east is going to be our strikes, as well as their escorting anti-radiation missile shooters, as well as their supporting jammers. We have a mix of long range, medium range, and short range systems defending our target area, which is Disneyland in this case. Or Disney World, I'm sorry. And then there to the southeast is going to be our command and control and high value cap. So our E2D as well as its escorts. So we had a baseline package, E2D, some Super Hornets and F-35Cs on cap. We have a mixed sweep going in as well, using a couple of F-35Cs and Super Hornets. Our strikes in our first use case is going to be using 500-pound JDAM bombs. We've got some jammers with some anti-radiation missiles going after the early warning radars. We have some decoys, some jammers, and then we have a seed escort for our strikes. In this case, we did 10 different variations. We had a baseline, and then we have each of our different variations. We're going to see 3 of these. These are a mix of different strikes, as well as stealth versus non-stealth strikes, and standoff versus non-standoff. We also varied the number of seed escorts, the number of strikers, as well as the number of decoys supporting the strike. So defending force is always going to be 4 Su-35s on cap, a single SA-21, 3 SA-17 platoons for medium range, and then 2 SA-15 short range or SHORADs. The blue objective is 8 designated targets. And then in this first set, we've got an E2D, again, 2 Super Hornets escorting our E2D, 4 aircraft on mid-cap, so 2 Super Hornets and 2 F-35s. We have 2 decoy shooters, so 16 decoys total, 2 decoy jammers. We have 6 aircraft in our primary seed element with the strike, and then supported by 2 jammers, and then we've got 4 F-35Cs using 500-pound bombs. So our cap went in, engaged. So we can see our decoys coming in here from the south. So all of our decoys have been intercepted. Our seed escorts are now engaging the air defenses. And after 100 runs, we can see that we, on average, had 13 weapons that hit their target, 0 misses, as well as the expenditures and losses. So we lost, on average, 3 Growlers and about 6 Super Hornets during each run. So on variant 2, we've added some more decoys, and we've upped the strike element as well. And we've also added some decoys with the strike as well. So we have 2 decoy elements coming in from both the southeast as well as the east, supporting our strikes. Not as effective on the seed effort in this run. So in this case, we actually hit less than what we hit before, only about 12 targets damaged. Again, no misses. We lost about 3.5 Super Hornets every run, and on average, less than one F-35C. And then our final iteration that we're going to show today, in this case, we are using F-35Cs with Stormbreakers in a standoff role. We've also supplemented this run with additional decoys in both the strike as well as the decoy or dedicated decoys, as well as additional seed aircraft. So after 100 runs, we've intercepted about 43 and a half, or we've hit 43 and a half of our targets every run, or weapons that hit their targets. In this case, we also had misses versus our other two runs using JDAMs. So we had about 15 and a half that missed their targets on each run. In this case, we also lost a number of our, we actually had a couple of runs where we lost some of our E2Ds. And then we lost less Super Hornets and F-35s versus the previous runs. So I'm going to take a quick look at the database next. We've talked about the database and the ability to edit it previously. So I want to take a quick look. So again, we have most frontline platforms from 1946 to near future. They're split into two databases. We have Cold War database from 1946 to about 1979, and then we have our DB3000 from 1980 to near future. You're looking at DB3K is the one relevant to most pro users. So just an example, I'm going to look for the F-35. So example here, we don't just have one monolithic F-35. We have the F-35 A, B, and C, and we as well as for the different countries that use it to represent both export and non-export models. So F-35A for the Royal Australian Air Force, for Belgium, Canada, Finland, Germany, as well as the USAF and other users. So looking at the actual form, most of our forms follow a general same pattern for most of the primary units, so aircraft, ships, submarines, all follow a general format, or generally the same format. So up here at the top is the general information that we saw there in the database in the sim. So length, wingspan, height, crew, the weights, in the case of aircraft, takeoff and landing distances. Below that, on the left, we can see the signature values. Now, by default, these are set based off the physical properties of the platform, so the length, the wingspan, etc. But you also have the ability to come into each of these fields and actually apply the real values to something. So if you know the real value, the real cross-section values for the F-35, you can come into any of these fields and modify it with the real value. So if I come in here into the radar fields, now by default, command does front, side, rear, and top angles. But we also, for aircraft, we also do have a full 3D splat. And that the 3D splat is actually set by an external file. However, in addition to the ability to actually manually apply a cross-section, we also have what we call modifiers. And what these are a way of quickly applying a value or capability to a platform. So we see here in the case of the F-35, it has modern shaping and advanced RAM. Really can't get much better than that in our current database values. But let's just say it doesn't actually have this sort of thing. Let's say we're experimenting with a fighter that had modern shaping, but only light radar absorbent material. So I click on the modern shaping, light RAM, refresh the values, and we can see that the radar value is instantly updated. This is similar for both visual as well as infrared. So let's say we had visually, we wanted to make our F-35 a high-vis platform. With conventional tanks. And we can see each of those values for visual as well as infrared change as we refresh those. Below that, we have what we call codes. And these are ways of applying capabilities to a platform. Is it fly-by-wire? What sort of bomb sight does it have? What sort of refueling does the platform have? So in the case of the F-35A here, we can see it has boom refueling versus, say, the F-15C, which may have probe refueling. We can also see various different modifiers for the radar cross-section and infrared cross-section. So we see it's got active cancellation, it's got S-shaped intakes, stealthy pylons. We've masked the intake, the exhaust, as well as the intakes, etc. Propulsion is below that, so we see the engine as well as the fuel values. And in the middle of the form, we see the sensors, the mounts, and the loadouts. Now I mentioned earlier that we do have the way, or we can quickly add or modify platforms. So currently we have the 25 millimeter cannon on the F-35. But what if we wanted to create a future variant that had the ability to that had an onboard laser? Just going to set our RCS back. So I'm going to remove the onboard cannon. And by just typing in, for example, laser weapon demonstrator. And then I'm going to give it an arc that it can shoot. And by that, I've quickly added a laser weapon to the F-35 to replace the onboard cannon. This is similar for sensors. Has an APG-85 sensor. There's really not much better we can do than that at the moment with this current sensor capabilities. But let's just, as an example, say we wanted to put on a Sabre or APG-83 radar. I believe this is found on the F-16, some of the F-16 models, as well as the B-1. And so we can either choose from the list or type if we know the name of the radar. And then looking at each of these platforms, or each of these sensors, we can actually see. So Access has the ability to go into these platforms, or quickly go into these platforms and actually see a look at their capabilities. So looking at the APG-85, if I double click on the arrow, it takes us to the APG-85 sensor or center page. So we can see up at the top, we can see its range. So up here at the top right, this range here represents the actual radar range that's displayed in the sim. And the radar and the sensor page is broken down into various sections depending on the type of sensor. So radars are here in the top central section. ESM, ECM, visual, infrared, minesweeping, and sonar is over here to the right. So we're concerned, because it's a radar, we're concerned primarily with the radar stats. So we can see its vertical and horizontal beam width, system noise, processing gain, a peak power, pulse width, PRF. And all of these go into modifying the radar range. And so we see it has a theoretical instrument range of 202 nautical miles. That's where this radar range here. So even though it has a theoretical range of 202, the actual 200 is the value we've applied to this. And if I come in here and modify any of these stats, well, let's increase its power. And let's say we've also increased the PRF. And by doing that, we can see it now has a theoretical instrument range of 162 nautical miles. Versus if I lower it, I've increased its range. And then similar to normal platforms, we can see down here on the bottom different capabilities for the radar. So this radar has the ability for IFF, so identify friend or foe. It has NCTR capability in narrow beam mode. That is the ability to essentially scan the skin of an aircraft and create a digital image of it. It's trackable scan. It's a low probability of intercept. It's a look down, shoot down radar or capability, and it's an ASO radar. So going back here to command, what I'm going to show now is the ability to convert the database and compare two platforms next to each other. So I'm going to use our F-35 here. So we have our laser weapon demonstrator. And actually what I should have done is create a copy of this platform, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and close my database here. I'm going to come back to command. I'm going to open up my database menu. I'm going to go to database tools. I'm going to path to where my database is. And I'm not going to show that. 5. Okay, so I've pathed to where my database is. I'm going to convert my file. Actually, I need to rename this file before I do that. Just call this one stream because it's going to give the same name. I don't want to replace the existing file. That up. It's going to run the conversion process. It'll take about a minute. And then I'm going to have to restart command as soon as this is done converting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a very quick scenario using a standard F-35A as well as our hypothetical version with a laser. There we go. It took about 45 seconds. Converted the database. I'm going to go ahead and restart command now. So I'm going to take that file that I just made. I'm going to go to my command PE folder. I'm going to drop that new database DB3 file into my database folder, and then I will restart. So I will create a new scenario. I'm going to add a blue side and a red side. Actually, one thing to check, make sure I'm using the correct database. I'm using my stream database by default. By default, command, when you create a new scenario, we use whatever the database is that's been the newest. So I'm going to create a red side. I'm going to create a blue side, or blue and red side. Red side over here on the left is just going to be some target drones. So I'm going to create two groups, one on the left, one on the right. I'm going to go back to the blue side. I'm going to add a E3G early warning aircraft. Turn off our surface sensors. So I'm going to use the 2026 version for our stand-in with the onboard cannon. We see that this is still using the 25mm cannon. And then we see our other variant here is using our laser weapon demonstrator. So for this example, I'm going to just give ferry loadouts to this. So over here on the left will be, or on, I'm sorry, on the right will be our laser weapon demonstrator, and over here on the left will be our version using the onboard cannon. Need to change our doctrine settings. To allow engagements with air-to-air guns. We'll run our scenario. In fact, the other thing I need to do, I need to come in here. I need to set the blue side to see red as hostile. I'm also going to declare all these contacts as hostile. And then here on the left, we'll go ahead and give the F-16 an automatic attack order to engage with its guns. Now, this isn't a realistic scenario. The F-35. It's unlikely the F-35 will, in most cases, will ever engage with its onboard cannons, but this is a good sampling sample of the differences. So give him an order. Not sure who he's trying to attack right now. I guess he's attacking it. I think it's because these aircraft are circling. It's making the engagement a little hard to plot that intercept. So I'm just going to go ahead and give these guys a course. Same thing with this group over here. It's worked a lot better in my tests. So we can see our gun runs. Not got a miss. So then going over to our laser weapon demonstrator, I'll go ahead and give our F-35 on the right its attack order to engage. So looking at our engagement range, we see that our laser actually has a range of 10 nautical miles versus our onboard cannon with a max range of 1 nautical or 0.8 nautical miles versus air targets. Just keep giving. Want those drones flying in a straight line for this particular test. Our F-35's got an intercept course. And then we can instantly see the difference of the laser versus the onboard cannon. So a very quick, if unrealistic example of what you can do with the command database. Can one see the values? Let me go ahead and reopen the database. But you gotta find what window I have that in. There we go. Reopen the database. So it depends on the platform. It depends on their repair capability. So aircraft have very limited, if zero, repair capability. In fact, I don't even think it's an entry. Nope, it is not an entry on the aircraft. However, on ships, they do have a repair capacity. And I believe if I'd have to go look at the database manual to find out the actual values. If it's 0, I think the code assumes something versus if you fill in a value. I don't remember what those are off the top of my head, but this is where you would define that. And that is going to conclude today's live stream. That's going to conclude today's live stream. For more information, you can email us at Command P or contact us at pro@matrixprosims.com. The next live stream will be next month on the 18th of March. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day wherever you may be.